Hi boys and girls, this is Thursday's video for comparing fractions, and I'm going to do the same strategy that we focused on in class, which was cross multiplying, because this was by far the favorite and what we used majority of the time. So cross multiplying, this says cross multiply denominator by numerator to compare the products. So the way that this works is that you have two fractions and you want to see which one's greater than the other. If they have the same denominator, for example, 2/4 and 3/4, it's very easy to compare because they have the same denominator, so they're the same size pieces, and 3 is this numerator, which is obviously greater than 2, because 3 is larger than 2, so we know that 3/4 is greater than 2/4, or 2/4 is less than 3/4. So when they have the same denominator, it's pretty easy. But when they're different, like these examples, it's kind of tough because when you have 2/5 and 3/4, it's kind of hard to picture what those would look like. It's not easy to draw shapes that are perfect for comparing with shading. So cross multiplying is a great way to do it. So a few things that I want to point out. You'll notice that when you cross multiply, your arrows always go up and to the opposite side. So this denominator goes up to this numerator. This denominator goes up to this numerator. And that's really important because as you can see, we did 4 times 2, which is 8. And then 5 times 3, which is 15. And then we know that 8 is less than 15. And then you can see that the sign stays the same. Therefore, 2/5 is less than 3/4. So that was kind of a lot, so I'm going to walk you through that a little more. So why is it important that your arrows go up and in that diagonal direction? Well, because when you're comparing these two fractions, you're taking this denominator and multiplying it by that numerator, and then this stays on that side. So you do 5 times 3, which is 15, and then that now represents this right-hand side. So then you do 4 times 2, which is 8, and now this represents that side. And then you compare 8 and 15. 8 is less than 15, so it stays on that side with that fraction. Therefore, 2/5 is less than 3/4. So it's a little tricky, but we'll do a few examples, and you guys really rocked this in class. So I'm hoping that you still have a really great memory of that for your worksheets. So this is the same thing, but with a couple different examples. So you'll see that we're comparing 3/8 and 2/6. So you can see both the arrows are going up and in the opposite direction. So the first one is 6 times 3 is 18. So you'll see that this is represented over here now. 6 times 3 equals 18. So 18 is our number for the left-hand side. Then you'll see that it goes 8 times 2 is 16, which is now represented on the right-hand side. So then we compare 18 and 16. 18 is larger than 16. Therefore, 3/8 is larger than 2/6, which you can see over here. So that sign stays the same. One thing that I want you to look out for is that one thing that some students struggled with is that they would do this work on a separate sheet of paper, and then when they went to draw the greater than, less than, or equal to sign in the bubble, they would kind of forget which way they had written it or not really pay close attention to which fraction was on which side, and they would write it the opposite way. So, for example, you did all this work to figure out that 18 is larger than 16, and it should be 18 is greater than 16, and then when you go to write it in the bubble, you accidentally write the sign the wrong way. So that's just about slowing down and taking your time to walk through each of the problems. So this is actually a worksheet that we did in class when we were working on it all together, so I hope that you remember it, but we'll do a few examples here. So we have 3/9 and 5/15. So we're going to do 15 times 3 and then 9 times 5. So I'll write this on another sheet of paper here. So we have 3/9 and 5/15. So we draw our arrows up. We're going to do 15 times 3. And we draw this arrow up to do 9 times 5. So 15 times 3, I know 15 and 15 is 30, plus another 15 is 45. Therefore, 45 goes on this side. Then we do 9 times 5, which is 45. So 45 goes on this side. Then 45 and 45, those are equal to each other because 45 is equal to 45. Therefore, 3/9 and 5/15 are equal to each other. Okay? And really what this is doing is, long story short, it's basically finding a common denominator. It's bringing these numbers to a common denominator and basically just having you compare the numerators. But that's an extra step that's really confusing. So this is kind of a way to just do it without knowing all the behind the scenes of it. So that's something that you will learn more in 4th grade. But at this point, we just want to be able to compare our two fractions. And cross multiplying is a really great way to do that. So we have 2/8, and then we have 3/6. All right, so we want to do 6 times 2, so we draw our arrow up, and then 8 times 3, so we draw our arrow up. So 6 times 2, I'll write it out, 6 and 6 is 12, and then 8 times 3, 8 and 8 is 16, plus another 8 is 24. Therefore, 24 is larger than 12. So remember, when we do the greater than, less than, or equal to, if they're the same, they're equal. If a number is less than, it's the less than sign. If it's greater than, it's the greater than sign. And with the greater than and less than, remember the open side is, picture the open mouth of an alligator. So it wants to eat the bigger piece. Therefore, it faces the bigger number. So our greater than sign is going to face the 24 because 24 is larger than 12. So when we go to write this on the piece of paper, you just have to be very careful because right now it shows you can either read it as 24 is greater than 12 or 12 is less than 24. But you want to make sure that the 12 stays on the 2/8 side and the 24 stays on the 3/6 side. So when you write your sign, just make sure it looks exactly how it does on your paper for practice, just to make sure that you're doing that correctly. So we'll do a few more. 5/8. And 3/8. So we draw our arrows. 8 times 5 is 40. And if you want to write these all out, the multiplication facts, that's totally fine with me. You can use distributive property if the numbers are too big. 8 times 3, sorry, my arrows are not perfect by any means. 8 times 3 is 24. Therefore, 40 is greater than 24. So 5/8 is greater than 3/8. So really all it comes down to is taking those two fractions and making sure that you're multiplying the opposite denominator with that numerator, and then that's the number that represents that fraction, and then that same denominator multiplying it by the opposite numerator, and then that new number represents that fraction, and then you just compare the two numbers. The other thing that's really important is just that, so I always write them on top just because I like to follow the arrows. So 6 times 3 is 18, 8 times 2 is 16, just because it keeps everything in line, but really whatever's easiest for you is fine by me. So if you need to pause the video and take some notes about how this looks up here, that's fine by me. And so we'll do a few more of them from this worksheet here. And I'll do them out in color over here. So we have 4/5 and 2/4. So we're gonna want to do 4 times 4. Follow that arrow. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 2 is 10. 16 is greater than 10. Therefore, 4/5 is greater than 2/4. We'll kind of hop around here. 2/3. 4/10. 10 times 2 is 20. 3 times 4 is 12. 20 is greater than 12. Therefore, 2/3 is greater than 4/10. Okay? So also another thing that's really important to notice, for example, let's look at problem number 9 here. If your two denominators, so the two numbers on the bottom, if one of the numbers is half of the other number, you can also multiply it by 2. And this works for other numbers. For example, if we were comparing 1/2 and 1/6, we could multiply 1/2 by 3/3 because 2 times 3 is 6. So that would get us to an equivalent fraction, or not an equivalent fraction, but it would give us an equivalent denominator. So if we wanted to do 1/2 times 3/3, which is 1, so we're not changing the number, but 1/2 times 3/3 would be 3/6. So 3/6 is equal to 1/2. Therefore, you can compare 3/6 and 1/6, and you know that 3/6 is greater, therefore 1/2 is greater than 1/6. That's really hard, and a few students liked doing it that way, but that's kind of a really complicated way to look at it for some of us. So we don't have to do it that way, but if it's easier for you to find a way to get your denominators to an equivalent denominator, then by all means go right ahead. But so say we have 5 and 10 for denominators down here. So 5 is half of 10. Therefore, you can multiply 2/5 times 2. So 2/5 times 2/2 equals 4/10. So we know 4/10 and 2/5 are equal. So we can compare 4/10 and 3/10 because they have the same denominator now. So 4/10 is greater than 3/10, therefore 2/5 is greater than 3/10. And that's a lot easier to look at when you're drawing, when you shade in 2/5 and then you shade in 3/10. It's a lot easier to visually see it. But if your brain works where you like to multiply it or divide it out to figure it out, then by all means go for it. But cross multiplying is a great way. I'll do just one more. So 3/8, we'll do number 5. 3/8 and 1/3. So 8 times 1 is 8. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 is greater than 8. Therefore, 3/8